Hi, and welcome to The Story of Cooking. I'm Sarah Nicholas. This show explores people and their unique story of cooking. Each week we're going to be looking at a different group of people and how you can create their story in your own kitchen. You don't have to be a 4-star chef, but you just have to have a love for cooking and an interest in history, and you can create this meal in your own home. Today's episode, we're going to talk about my story of cooking. A little selfish topic, but I definitely think it's got some value and definitely some good Southern food. The first dish we're going to make is definitely something you find a lot in the South. It's probably something you find everywhere in the United States, but we're going to make it my way that I grew up with, and that is macaroni and cheese. Everybody's favorite, certainly my childhood favorite. I'm sure every kid in America loves macaroni and cheese. There's so many different ways to make it too. This is actually a pretty simple way to make it. You can get really fancy with mac and cheese. It's kind of the in thing to do now. There's truffle mac and cheese, lobster mac and cheese. This is just good old-fashioned Southern mac and cheese. So the first thing we're going to do is boil our noodles for the mac and cheese. We have 8 ounces of elbow macaroni, salted water, and you don't want to cook them that much. You want them to be a little tender, but still firm to the bite, because they're going to cook more in the oven with all of the other ingredients that we're going to add to the mac and cheese. So it shouldn't take too long, maybe 5-6 minutes tops, maybe less. So my inspiration growing up is obviously Southern food in all its various forms, mac and cheese. The other recipes we're going to be doing are Virginia ham biscuits, and the last one are my mom's famous green beans that she always makes for holidays. But growing up, the cooks I looked up to were my nanny, who's my great-grandmother, and my mother. My mother's gotten better at cooking over the years, and especially with mac and cheese. When she first met my now dad, we were about 6 years old, and he came in. He was going to try to impress me and my twin sister Courtney with his mac and cheese, because Mom was like, they love mac and cheese. They eat it all the time. So he came in and made this really, like, probably normal, but fancy mac and cheese for us. And I immediately complained. I was like, I don't like this, I don't like this. He's like, why don't you like this? And it was because it wasn't the boxed Kraft macaroni and cheese. All right, so that's actually not gonna take too much longer. I actually didn't start doing cooking on a more professional level till a few years ago. I thought that I was going to be very practical and go to law school and do something practical with my life. And then 7 years after working for the federal government, I realized I didn't even like what I was doing. And so I sat down and made a list of things that made me happy, and food was second next to family. And I'd always loved cooking, so I decided to quit my job, a secure paycheck, and move to New York City and go to culinary school. And then ever since then, it's just been a whirlwind. So I've had a few careers. I've had a teaching career, a career in law enforcement. I've even been a tennis pro, but by and far, this is the best decision I've ever made. Because food is great. Food is love. I love cooking. So I'm happy that I get to do that every day and share these recipes with you. Okay, so this actually looks about done. Again, you don't want it cooked till it's mushy, because you're gonna cook it again in the oven. You can even take one out and test it, but it looks good. All right, so we got our bowl so we can mix all of our ingredients. I actually think, not this recipe, but this is one of my mother's recipes, but the recipe she uses actually comes from Mrs. Rouse in Stanton, Virginia, which I talked about in a different episode about the rhubarb pie. She also made really, really good mac and cheese. She's a lady of the South. So we have our 8 ounces of noodles. To that, we're gonna add butter. Let me move this stuff around, sorry. To that, we're gonna add butter. 3 tablespoons of butter. We also have 3 tablespoons of, well, let's do the milk first. We have 3 cups of milk. Milk and heavy cream look the same, sorry. 3 cups of milk. Looks like that's gonna be enough. We have a little extra here, but We don't need it. Okay, then we have 3 tablespoons of AP flour to help bind everything together. All right, mustard powder. I love mustard powder. It adds a little kick to the dish. Another ingredient I always like to add to my mac and cheese, not traditional in my household, but I love to add grated onion. I think that really makes it a good dish too. Salt, kosher salt. We have some pepper. I'll kick it up. And lastly, we got our cheese. This is just sharp cheddar cheese. You can use whatever cheese you like, just something that melts really well. Save a little extra to put on the top. And then I always like to add Parmesan cheese because I like that sharpness. So we have 3 tablespoons of Parmesan cheese as well. And maybe a little pepper. Black pepper. Throw that in there. Okay. Mix that all together. I know it looks really soupy now, but once you get it in the oven and those noodles finish cooking, it'll absorb all that, and the cheese will help hold it together, and the flour will help hold it together as well. Okay, so this is gonna go into a 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes. We have a casserole dish ready. So I think every family probably has their different version of mac and cheese, the way they like it. And mac and cheese is good. It's really a versatile food because you can add anything to it. I know a lot of parents add tuna mac and cheese. That was always a popular childhood favorite. In those fancy restaurants you always go to, they have like bacon and prosciutto on top of their mac and cheese and 6 different kinds of cheeses incorporated and Mornay sauce and bechamel sauce, and you can really do anything with it. I mean, it's cheese, butter, and noodles. So everything tastes good. All right, sprinkle some cheese on top. And that's ready to go in a 350-degree oven again for 30 minutes. Everything should be firm when you jiggle it. When it's done, it should be golden on the top. We're gonna pop this in a 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes. I'm gonna get this area cleaned up, and when we come back, we'll make our buttermilk biscuits with our Virginia ham. Okay, we're back, and I have everything ready to start my buttermilk biscuits. The first thing we're gonna do is actually start with the spread. It's gonna go on the biscuits with the Virginia ham. And to do that, some really interesting ingredients, but trust me, they taste good in the end. We need a pot over low heat. We're gonna melt 2 sticks of butter. Real butter, not margarine. It's a southern dish after all. Okay, and let that melt on low heat. You don't want it to brown, so don't get the heat too high. All right. To that mixture, we're gonna add our onions, 1/2 cup of onion. And we're not looking to caramelize it, but we just want to soften it a little bit. So we always had ham biscuits in my house. We always had Virginia ham, which is different than what a lot of people think of ham as being. People think of ham as being sweet. Virginia ham is not sweet. It's actually very, very salty. So that's why this sauce is good too, because this sauce is actually a little sweet. And we'll add some sweet ingredients in a minute, which will really help counterbalance that really, really salty ham. If you don't like the ham so salty, a lot of people actually take the ham and soak it to get rid of some of that salt, but I really like it salty. I like everything salty. I'm more of a salt person than a sweet person. And the reason it's so salty is because it is cured for 2 to 3 months. All right, so this looks pretty good. The onions are a little soft. We can actually take that off the heat, and we can add in our other ingredients. We have, let's start with the Worcestershire sauce. We have Dijon mustard. We have honey. There's the sweet I was talking about. I don't know why I'm using such a big spoon. It's not gonna work, is it? All right, so put honey in there. And you can add more of honey, more of mustard, depending on what you like. And last, we have poppy seeds. That makes it kind of look cool too when it's spread on the biscuit. And you're just gonna let this cool because it's actually just gonna become spread, like when the butter gets cold and gets solid again. So you can spread it on the biscuits when they're done. So we're just gonna let that hang out. Use it again later. Okay, now time for the biscuits. So these are my great-grandmother Nanny's buttermilk biscuits, her recipe. And she made buttermilk biscuits every day. She grew up on she lived on a horse farm in Virginia. And so she would make a dozen biscuits for everybody that worked on the farm every day. So she was quite the baker, and this recipe is really good, very old-fashioned. So we're gonna start with our dry ingredients. We have 3 cups of AP flour. Get it all over me. We have baking powder and baking soda. You can sift all this together would probably be the better way to go. Actually, my nanny's probably rolling over in her grave that I did not sift these together, but I didn't, so we're just gonna stir them together. Okay. Let's add some salt as well. That'll help. Okay, and to that, you can use vegetable shortening, which is what I'm gonna use today. A lot of people in the South still use lard. You can use lard as well, which is very good. But you wanna make sure it's cold. You're gonna cut it into the dry mixture. And you can use whatever tool you have. If you have a whisk, that might work. You might actually use your hands. They have a thing called a cutter. It looks like a half moon shape. And it's actually got these whisk-like extensions on them, and it actually cuts the butter or the shortening into the dry mixture. But you can use a whisk. It doesn't work quite as well, and it might take a little longer, but you can do it this way. Also, you can use a fork. It's got the prongs too. Anything that has prongs, you can cut the shortening or lard or whatever you're using into the mixture. I think probably vegetable shortening is probably a little more popular than lard nowadays. All right. See how that's kind of sandy consistency? The shortening's cut into the dry mixture. See, it's even okay if you do it with your hands. The problem with doing it with your hands is sometimes your body temperature is a little too hot and it kind of melts the shortening. So if you're a really cold-handed person like I usually am, it might work. Best pastry chefs probably have the coldest hands. Okay, so last ingredient is the buttermilk. You can pour that in and mix it all up. So if you don't have buttermilk, I live in the north now. I live in New York, and I was trying to make these biscuits for my in-laws not too long ago, and I went to the store to get buttermilk. I actually went to the store to get grits too, and I couldn't find either. I was like, where am I living? You don't have buttermilk or grits, but they didn't. So there's actually an easy way to make buttermilk, or make a buttermilk tasting, something that tastes like buttermilk. All you have to do is take whole milk and add a little vinegar. It'll have the same effect in the biscuits. So that's a pretty good tip. So these biscuits are obviously going to be topped with the ham in the spread. I actually have a really funny story about country ham, a recent story. I just said that I am new to New York, and I'm from Virginia, but now I live in New York after I got married and went to culinary school, moved to New York, and I have in-laws that have lived in New York most of their life. My mom decided she was going to show a little Southern hospitality, and she decided that she was going to send them a Virginia ham. So it arrived right before Christmas, and it was huge. It was, I don't even know how much it weighed. It probably weighed, I don't know, at least 18 pounds. I don't know, that's probably dramatic. But it was really, really big, and they were like, what are we gonna do with this? And they never really, had a lot of experience with Virginia ham. So I was really excited. I was like, well, I'll show you what to do with Virginia ham. So I made ham 3 ways. I made these biscuits. I made a pasta, because they're Sicilian. My husband's mother is Sicilian. And so I made a pasta with the ham, and I think I had peas in there. I don't know, it was really good. And then I actually crumbled ham on top of a cobbler. You cut the ham up and you put it in a pan, and just crisp it up like you would bacon and crumple it on top of something sweet. So good. Kind of goes with the whole like popular thing of having like bacon and everything, and in chocolate and desserts. Virginia ham can be the same way. Okay, so I am kneading the dough. Needs a little more flour. Just trying to form a ball so I can roll it out into biscuits. You don't want to knead it too much, but. So anyway, needless to say, the ham was a big hit. However, we still have leftovers and it's still in the freezer. We still can't get rid of that ham. But it is so good. You can put it on sandwiches, do anything you want with it. And it's also, it freezes really well. In case you have the pleasure of getting an 18-pound ham from your in-laws. It freezes really well. Okay, so we're gonna roll these out. Rolling pin. Put a little flour on the rolling pin. You don't want to be too thin. They will puff up though because you have the baking powder, the baking soda. Oop, sticking a little bit. If that happens, just put more flour. Just a couple more rolls. The rolling pin. Good. All right. If you don't have a cookie cutter, which I do not have a cookie cutter today, you can be very industrious and use the top of a mason jar. As long as it's the right size you want. You can use anything as long as it cuts, which this does. We have our pan ready for the oven. All right, and just cut them out. Little rings. I kind of like them like a little thinner when I'm making ham biscuits, just because they are going to puff up some, and you want it to be able to you want to be able to bite the biscuit when you eat it. You don't want to have a huge mouthful. You want to be able to get your mouth around it. So. Just like those huge sandwiches that are always so delicious, they have all that meat and everything else in there, but you can't get your mouth around it so it ends up all over your shirt, kind of like the flour just did. So you want it to be manageable. Okay. Get those out. Just place them on the cookie sheet. They won't go this way, they'll go this way, hopefully. So if they're a little close together, that's fine. You can actually, I did them a little too thin, to be honest. You can make them a little thicker than this, but these will still be good. Great. And don't waste any dough. We're gonna re-roll this dough as well. Get a little closer together here. There we go, perfect. Okay. I'm gonna pop these in the oven, 350 degrees for no more than 15 minutes, usually 10 to 15 minutes. Keep an eye on them, it depends on your oven. I'm gonna get this area cleaned up, and when we come back, we'll do our green beans. Okay, we're back and we're on to our last dish. This is gonna be the green beans. This is my mother's recipe for green beans. They're dressed up green beans. That's what she likes to call them. We always have them on holidays. My brother Kenny hates them, but she insists on having them because everybody else loves them and we don't really care what he thinks. So we always have them on holidays. Every once in a while it'll be nice and make him his own pot, but usually these are it. So we're gonna blanch the green beans. These are already cleaned. The stems are cut off, ready to go. We're gonna let those go for a minute, and then we're gonna put them in cold water to shock them to keep the nice green color. In the skillet, we're going to add bacon. 4 strips of bacon. We're just gonna crisp it up. You can see why this is gonna be good already, huh? All right. Render down that fat, get it nice and crispy. As soon as some of the fat cooks out, we can add our onions. My mom actually removes, after she crisps the bacon, she removes it and then adds the onions and just cooks the onions in the bacon fat, but I like to cook it all together. It's just as easy. Get the onions a little caramelized too. Alright. Let's go ahead and add our onions, 2 small onions. You can use shallots as well. Shallots are a little sweeter. Some people like shallots. Also fancies them up a little bit more, but onions are just as good. This definitely would have been a dish we would have at Thanksgiving, Christmas, you name it. Every holiday or special event, my mom likes to make these. Even when we have the family potlucks that I talked about in a different episode, this might be a dish that my mom would bring for the family potluck. Alright, we're going to let that go for a few more minutes. So as you can see, all these recipes are definitely very Southern, and they're the way I like to eat still, and I like to cook still. I went to a French Culinary Institute. It's now known as the International Culinary Center in Manhattan, so I learned a lot of French techniques, and they're all very good. It was good that I learned them, and I learned some really good recipes, but I still, when I want to do cooking in my own home, I like to do Southern cooking. And you can still use those good French techniques for any type of cooking. Just learning how to chop something properly is invaluable. Alright, so the green beans, oops, lost one. Sorry about that. The green beans look good. I'm going to drop them into cold water. I like my green beans still a little crispy. You can cook them longer if you like them a little mushier. I think it's really important though to have fresh green beans for this dish. I don't know why you would ever cook it with canned green beans, so try to avoid doing that. They're so much better this way. Keep losing them. Alright. One more. Two more. This probably wasn't the best tool to use for this. There we go. Okay. So, getting crispy. Once that fat's rendered and the bacon looks like it's getting crispy, then you can start adding your green beans and the rest of your ingredients. Okay. Let's go ahead and toss these green beans in here. Again, should definitely make sure, you should probably drain these, but for time's sake, I'm just gonna grab them and shake them, because you don't want that extra water in the grease because it will splatter when it hits when there's a lot of extra water, so just be careful. That wasn't too bad. Grease burns are not fun burns. Okay. Toss those around. Looks pretty, doesn't it? When you blanch beans and then shock them in cold water, they just keep that nice bright color. Alright, last two ingredients. We have red wine vinegar. You can actually use apple cider vinegar as well. And sugar. That'll help caramelize everything in the pan. I'm going to let this go a minute or two longer. In the meantime, I'm going to get this area all cleaned up, and when we come back, we'll have all three dishes plated. Okay, we're back and we have everything plated, the perfect Southern meal. All you need is a tall glass of sweet iced tea. We have our green beans with the bacon and the onions. Our mac and cheese with the sharp cheddar and a little Parmesan to add a kick. And then we also have my favorite, the Buttermilk Biscuits with the Virginia cured salt ham and the nice little poppy seed spread to add a little sweetness. Looks great. Thank you for joining me on this chapter of the story of cooking. I'm Sarah Nicholas. See you next time.